Have you ever spoken in a room and realized no one was listening? Have you ever told a story only to be interrupted halfway through? Have you laughed at someone else's joke because yours fell flat? How many times have you walked away from conversations asking yourself, am I invisible? Do my words even matter? You know, that quiet sting, the shame of being ignored, the ache of watching others get attention while you fade into the background. And deep down, you wonder if this is your destiny to always speak, yet never be heard. But here's the brutal truth. The louder you try to be, the less power you hold. Noise is everywhere. The world is full of people begging for attention, shouting, oversharing, posting, performing. And when you join the noise, you become forgettable, ordinary, replaceable. In that moment at the dinner table when they laughed and spoke over you, you felt powerless. But what if I told you that power doesn't come from being the loudest voice? What if the secret isn't in raising your tone but in lowering it? What if true authority begins not with words but with silence? This is the Machiavellian paradox. The more you chase approval, the further it runs. The more you try to prove yourself, the weaker you look. Yet the moment you stop performing, stop begging, stop explaining, the world begins to notice you. Because power is never in noise. It is born in presence. In the chapters ahead, you will learn how to turn silence into a weapon, how to use restraint as a crown, and how to walk into any room with the kind of gravity that forces people to lean toward you without you lifting a finger. But before we begin this ruthless journey into sovereign silence, ask yourself, are you ready to let go of the need to be heard so you can finally be remembered? If these words strike a hidden chord in you, don't just scroll past. Stay with me. Subscribe now and step into a world where you are no longer invisible, where your silence speaks louder than their noise. Have you ever stared into the mirror and hated the reflection? Have you ever looked at your own eyes and thought, why does the world not take me seriously? Why do I feel small, even when I try my hardest to be strong? How many times have you practiced the perfect smile, the perfect line, the perfect pose only to watch yourself crumble the moment someone cuts you down? That pain is real. The quiet shame of not feeling enough. The fear that no matter what you do, you'll always be the one overlooked, underestimated, ignored. You know it in your bones. You've worked, you've tried, and still, you are unseen. And here's the cruel irony: most people will tell you to fix yourself in front of that mirror. Smile more, stand taller, repeat affirmations, pretend you're confident until you believe it. But you've tried that, haven't you? And deep down you know it's a mask that slips the moment life tests you. The truth is, the mirror doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the full story either. When you look into it, you only see surface, the tired eyes, the forced grin, the flaws you obsess over. But Machiavelli knew a secret. True power doesn't come from polishing the outside. It comes from rewriting the story inside. What if, instead of asking, how do I look, you asked, how do I carry myself when no one is watching? What if you stopped trying to impress the reflection and instead commanded the presence behind it? Because the world doesn't follow pretty smiles, it follows unshakable presence. From this chapter forward, your mirror will no longer be your enemy. It will be your battlefield. Each time you look, you won't adjust your hair or fake a grin. You will remind yourself, I am sovereign. I do not beg. I do not explain. I do not need permission. When you own that truth, the reflection changes, not because your face is different, but because your presence radiates beyond it. If this strikes you, if you've ever felt broken by your own reflection, don't walk away. Stay. Subscribe to this channel. Because in the silence beyond the mirror, you will find not just confidence, but dominion. Have you ever sat in a meeting, your hands sweating under the table, rehearsing the perfect sentence in your head, only to watch someone else blurt out nonsense and still get all the attention? Have you ever spoken up only to feel your words vanish into thin air, drowned out by louder voices? And tell me honestly, how many times have you stayed quiet? Not because you wanted to, but because you were terrified of being ignored again. You know that pain. That heavy silence that isn't chosen but forced upon you by fear. And it cuts deep, doesn't it? Because in that room, surrounded by people, you felt smaller than ever, powerless, invisible. Here's the truth no one dares to tell you: most people talk to prove they exist. They fill the air with noise, hoping volume will disguise insecurity. And for a moment it works. They look confident, bold, important. But beneath it, they are desperate. And desperation always cracks. Now imagine this: you walk into that same meeting, but instead of scrambling for words, you choose silence. Not silence from fear, silence from control. You look around the room, calm, deliberate, steady. Others speak, chatter, argue, but your stillness begins to disturb them. They start glancing at you, wondering what you're thinking, wondering why you're not rushing to speak. Suddenly, your silence becomes pressure. The loudest voices stumble. Someone fills the void with too much information, revealing more than they should. Another person looks to you for validation, as if your nod carries more weight than their words. And here's the Machiavellian paradox: by saying nothing, you've said everything. This is your first taste of sovereign silence. Not weakness, not hesitation, but weaponized restraint. In the meeting where you once felt powerless, you now hold the frame. From today, stop filling the air just to be noticed. Instead, control the air by not needing to. Speak when it matters. And when you do, every word will land like a hammer. If this vision sparks something inside you, if you're tired of fading in every room, then don't walk away now. Subscribe. Because what you've just learned is the beginning. And in the chapters ahead, you'll discover how to turn silence into dominance and meetings into your empire. Have you ever noticed the way people's eyes change when they finally see you differently? Have you ever felt that flicker of hesitation in someone who used to dismiss you? The sudden pause when they realize you're not playing the same role anymore? And tell me honestly, how many times have you craved that moment? The moment when the balance of power tips, when for once you are no longer the one exposed, but the one being watched. That longing runs deep. Because for years, you've been the one over-explaining, defending, rushing to prove yourself. You've been the one sweating under the weight of judgment while others moved freely. And somewhere inside, you've whispered to yourself, when will it be my turn? Here's the turning point. The first shift doesn't happen with thunder. It happens in silence. In a meeting, in a conversation, in a crowded room. When you stop reacting, when you stop chasing approval, something unsettling happens. The people who once mocked you start to reveal their own cracks. One colleague speaks too much, blurts out a mistake. Another grows nervous under your steady gaze. And you don't move. You don't explain. You just watch. For the first time, you see what Machiavelli understood centuries ago: power is not always in action, it's in restraint. Your silence forces others to trip over themselves. Their insecurity becomes visible while your composure grows heavier, more magnetic. The crown is invisible, but everyone feels its weight. This is the first shift. The day you realize you don't need to fight for respect. It bends toward you when you stop begging for it. That subtle change is the crack in the wall, the proof that silence can dominate noise. That presence can outweigh performance. From this moment forward, remember, you don't need to expose weakness. People will do it for you the second you stop rushing to prove you're strong. If this moment resonates with you, if you've ever craved that shift in power, don't just let this lesson slip away. Subscribe now and follow along, because each chapter ahead will sharpen your silence until the world no longer sees you as invisible, but as inevitable. Have you ever wondered why some people can walk into a room and command respect without saying a word, while you've had to talk, explain, even beg just to be noticed? Have you ever felt that sting watching someone else's quiet presence hold more weight than your loudest argument? And doesn't it cut deep when you realize that no matter how much you speak, the world forgets your words, but remembers their silence? That's the pain. Most people never admit they think words equal power. They think if they argue harder, talk longer, or raise their voice higher, they'll finally be heard. But you know the truth, you've lived it. The more you talked, the more invisible you became. Here's the Machiavellian lesson: power lives in silence. History proves it. Kings didn't shout in crowded halls. They looked. Generals didn't plead with their soldiers. They paused, they waited, and the men obeyed. Silence is not absence, it is pressure. The kind of pressure that forces others to reveal themselves. Imagine this: you're sitting at the table. A friend brags, another complains, a third tries too hard to impress. And you say nothing. You hold your gaze calm, unshaken. Suddenly the air grows heavy. The bragger begins to stumble. The complainer grows nervous. The one trying too hard gets louder, desperate, until they make a mistake. You haven't moved, but the balance of power has shifted. This is the lesson: silence isn't weakness. It is a blade, sharp, invisible, and far deadlier than noise. When you master it, people think twice before speaking around you. They measure their words because your silence has weight. So ask yourself, will you keep chasing approval with words that vanish? Or will you finally claim the crown that comes from saying less and meaning more? If this strikes a hidden chord in you, if you've ever envied the calm authority of those who say nothing and still control everything, don't stop here. Subscribe now and keep walking with me, because what comes next will teach you not just to hold silence, but to make the world bend under it. Have you ever sat at a dinner table surrounded by people, family, friends, coworkers, and still felt completely invisible? Have you ever spoken only to be talked over by someone louder, while the group laughed at their words and ignored yours? And tell me honestly, how many times have you replayed those moments later, hating yourself for not standing up, for not demanding the respect you deserved? That pain is quiet, but it cuts deep. Because meals are supposed to be about connection, belonging, family. Yet for you, it often feels like a stage where your voice is drowned out, where your worth is measured and dismissed. You smile, you nod, you hide the sting, but inside, you burn. Here's the Machiavellian truth. Dinners are not just about food. They are social arenas, silent battlegrounds where power is tested. And the loudest person at the table is rarely the most powerful. True power belongs to the one who can sit still, speak little, and let the silence weigh on everyone else. Picture this. You decide to test it. Instead of fighting to be heard, you hold your silence. You watch. Someone brags too much. Another tries to dominate the table. But as you stay calm, composed, your silence becomes heavy. They begin to stumble, revealing insecurities, secrets they didn't plan to share. Suddenly, people glance at you not because you're talking, but because you're not. They want your reaction. They want your approval. This is the dinner test, the moment you realize silence is not absence, it is presence. You don't need to win the noise. You win by refusing to play their game. And when you do speak just a sentence, a single observation, it lands like thunder across the table. So ask yourself, will you keep trying to shout over others for scraps of attention, or will you hold your silence and let them trip over themselves trying to earn yours? If this resonates with you, if you've ever left a dinner feeling small, forgotten, or disrespected, don't leave this lesson unfinished. Subscribe now and follow along, because the next step will show you how to turn not just meals, but every gathering into your arena of quiet dominance. Have you ever been mocked in public, laughed at in front of others, and felt your face burn with shame? Have you ever had someone call you weak, timid, or worthless while everyone else smirked or looked away? And tell me honestly, how many times have you replayed that humiliation in your head, wishing you had the perfect comeback, the devastating line, the proof that you weren't the fool they made you out to be? That sting doesn't fade quickly. Being labeled as weak cuts deeper than almost any insult because it echoes your worst fear that maybe they're right, that maybe you are powerless. And in that moment, surrounded by eyes and laughter, you feel crushed small and exposed. But here is the Machiavellian truth. Your first enemy is not the one who insults you. It is the version of you that reacts desperately to it. The loud rebuttal, the defensive rant, the trembling need to prove yourself. That is weakness. That is surrender. Now imagine this instead. They mock you. The room laughs, but you don't flinch, you don't argue, you don't explain. You hold their gaze with silence, unshaken, unbothered. Seconds stretch like hours. Suddenly the mocker grows uncomfortable. His laugh cracks. He shifts in his seat. People stop laughing because your silence has turned the spotlight back onto him. He exposed himself, not you. This is how the first enemy falls. Not with words, not with anger, but with composure. Silence makes their attack look desperate, and desperation is weakness. By refusing to play their game, you force them to choke on their own performance. And the crowd, they begin to see you differently, not as the victim, but as the one who cannot be rattled. This is your lesson. Never waste energy fighting the clown who mocks you. Let silence humiliate him. Let composure crown you. If you've ever tasted that bitter shame of being mocked, and you're ready to make your enemies collapse under their own weight, don't stop here. Subscribe now and stay with me. Because in the next chapter, you'll discover how to turn whispers of doubt into whispers of power, and make even your critics seek your approval. Have you ever felt like every decision you made had to be cleared with someone else first? Have you ever caught yourself asking for permission, approval, or validation before doing something you already knew you wanted? And tell me honestly, how many times have you held back? Not because you lacked ability, but because you feared the disapproval of people who secretly don't even respect you. That's the quiet prison most people live in. You act, but always with invisible chains. You crave freedom, yet you hesitate, second guess, and ask yourself, will they like this? Will they accept me? And in that hesitation, your power slips away. But here is the Machiavellian truth. Real power doesn't ask. It decides, it moves, it acts. The whisper of power is the voice inside you that says, stop asking, stop begging, stop waiting. Just do. Picture this. You make a small decision without announcing it, without waiting for applause. You choose your own direction. At first, people are shocked. They question you, they test you, they push back. But you don't explain, you don't justify. You simply stand by your choice. And then something strange happens. People follow. They may resist at first, but soon they adapt, because your refusal to ask permission forces them to take you seriously. The whisper of power grows louder every time you act from sovereignty instead of insecurity. It doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It simply moves forward and others adjust. This is the lesson. When you stop asking, you start leading. Every apology you don't make, every justification you refuse to give, every decision you own without hesitation, these are bricks in the fortress of your authority. So ask yourself, will you keep living like a servant waiting for a nod before you move? Or will you finally listen to that whisper inside you, the one that tells you you've always had the crown, you just need to wear it? If this resonates, if you're tired of waiting for permission to live, then stay with me. Subscribe now and step further into this path, because the next chapter will show you how masks fall when silence exposes the lies of others. And that is where true domination begins. Have you ever sat in a room while someone bragged, endlessly puffing themselves up with stories and fake confidence, and deep down you knew it was all a performance? Have you ever envied how easily liars seem to win attention while your honesty was ignored? And tell me, how many times have you stayed silent thinking you lost, when in reality your silence was the only weapon you needed? Here's the truth you've always felt, but never admitted. Most people live behind masks. They cover their fear with jokes. They disguise their weakness with noise. They hide their emptiness with bragging. And for years you believed their performance. You believed you were the weak one. But then something changes. You hold your silence. You don't fight to expose them. You just watch. And in that stillness, the cracks appear. The braggart talks too long, repeats himself, slips up. People start glancing at you, noticing your calm presence in contrast to his desperate noise. Without a word, you've shifted the balance. The mask falls not yours, but theirs. This is the Machiavellian paradox. Liars collapse under their own performance when faced with someone who refuses to perform. By staying silent, you force the truth into the light. The faker is revealed, the crowd sees it, and you don't have to move a muscle. Imagine how different your life could be if you stopped competing with masks. If instead of proving yourself, you let others expose themselves. That is the power of sovereign silence. It unmasks the desperate, and it crowns the composed. So the question is no longer, how do I prove myself? The real question is, how long am I willing to let others destroy themselves in front of me? because the moment you stop rushing to win, you realize you've already won. If this speaks to you, if you've ever felt crushed by fake confidence and you're ready to make masks fall without lifting a finger, don't walk away now. Subscribe and stay with me, because the next chapter will show you how to wear your own crown, the invisible one that no one can take from you. Have you ever felt like no matter what you achieve, people still treat you as ordinary? Have you ever walked into a room and sensed that your presence carried no weight, that you were just another face in the crowd? And tell me honestly, how many times have you dreamed of being the one who sets the tone, the one others pause for, the one they respect before you even speak? That hunger runs deep. Because all your life you've been told that respect must be earned through titles, money, or applause. And yet you've seen it with your own eyes. There are people with less wealth, fewer accomplishments, and no special status who still walk as if they wear a crown, and the world bows. How is that possible? Here is the Machiavellian truth. The crown is not given. It is assumed. Authority begins the moment you carry yourself as though you already rule. It's not arrogance, it's inevitability. People sense it in your eyes, in your walk, in the silence between your words. They defer not because you demanded it, but because your presence makes it unavoidable. Imagine this. You enter a crowded space. You don't rush. You don't try to impress. You move deliberately as if every step belongs to you. Conversations pause. Eyes follow. No one can quite explain why, but they feel it. Your crown, though invisible, is undeniable. This is the inner crown, the unshakable belief that you are sovereign, that your worth is not up for debate. Once you wear it inside, the outside world has no choice but to respond. Titles, compliments, applause, they may come, they may not. But none of it matters because your authority doesn't depend on them. So ask yourself, will you keep waiting for the world to hand you respect? Or will you place the crown on your own head and let them adjust to you? If this strikes something deep within you, if you're tired of being treated as ordinary, when you know you were meant for more, don't let this moment pass. Subscribe now and stay with me. Because in the next chapter, you'll learn how to resist the temptation to break your silence and why one well-placed word can outweigh 1,000. Have you ever felt cornered, pressured to speak when you weren't ready? Have you ever been in a room where everyone stared at you waiting for your opinion, and you caved, blurting out words you later regretted? And tell me honestly, how many times have you felt the burning shame of realizing that the more you explained, the weaker you sounded? That pain is familiar. The pressure to respond, the fear of silence, the desperate need to prove you belong. It feels unbearable in the moment. You tell yourself, if I don't say something now, they'll think I'm stupid, weak, unprepared. And so you talk, and each word digs the hole deeper. Here's the Machiavellian truth: power does not come from meeting every challenge. It comes from restraint. The temptation to speak, to defend, to prove yourself, that is the trap. The more you give in, the more you lose. The one who speaks first often reveals too much. The one who explains appears guilty. But the one who waits, the one who chooses their words sparingly, that is the one who commands. Imagine this scene: you're in a meeting. Someone challenges your idea, and all eyes turn to you. Instead of rushing you, let the silence breathe. The challenger grows nervous, fills the gap with more words, more excuses. And when you finally speak just a single calm sentence, it lands like a hammer. The room shifts. You didn't win by volume, you won by timing. This is the lesson of temptation. Resist the urge to fill every silence. Hold your ground. Delay your response. When you do speak, make it deliberate, sharp, undeniable. That restraint transforms you from participant into ruler of the frame. So ask yourself, will you keep surrendering to the temptation of noise, or will you master the discipline of silence, the discipline that makes one word weigh more than 1,000? If this cuts into something you've lived, if you're tired of regretting the words you never needed to say, then don't stop here. Subscribe now and keep walking with me. Because in the next chapter, you'll learn the contrast between the noisy crowd and the one who commands simply by being still. Have you ever looked around a crowded room and felt drowned by the noise? Have you ever watched people fight to be noticed, talking over each other? laughing too loud, bragging too much, while you sat there fading into the background. And tell me honestly, how many times have you walked away feeling worthless, thinking the world will never remember the quiet one that pain eats at you? Because deep down, you know you have value. You know you have thoughts worth hearing. But in the chaos, your voice feels too small, too fragile, too easy to ignore. And so you tell yourself, maybe I should be louder. Maybe I should play their game. But here's the Machiavellian truth: the crowd of noise never wins. The noisy ones blur together indistinguishable, forgettable. Their desperation exposes them. Power does not come from joining the noise, it comes from standing apart, from being the contrast. Imagine this scene, a party full of voices, everyone scrambling for attention. You don't rush, you don't compete, you move slowly, speak rarely, watch carefully. Soon the contrast between you and them becomes obvious. They are frantic, you are composed. They are begging, you are sovereign. And the more they try to be seen, the more invisible they become, while your stillness makes you unforgettable. This is the lesson of contrast. Noise cancels itself out. Silence stands alone. Presence is amplified when it resists the chaos around it. You don't need to be louder than them, you need to be different from them. And difference, when paired with composure, becomes dominance. So ask yourself, will you keep competing with the noise, exhausting yourself for scraps of attention? Or will you embrace the contrast and let the world bend toward you because you are the one who cannot be ignored? If you've ever felt crushed by the chaos of louder voices, if you're ready to turn your quiet into power, then stay with me. Subscribe now and continue this journey, because in the next chapter you'll face resistance, the people who try to break your silence, and you'll learn how to turn their attacks into their downfall. Have you ever been provoked just to see if you would break? Have you ever had someone push your buttons, insult you, or mock you in front of others, waiting for you to explode so they could laugh at your reaction? And tell me honestly, how many times have you regretted taking the bait, knowing that your anger only made you look weaker? That pain is deep because it feels unfair. You weren't just attacked, you were baited. They wanted you to lose control, and when you did, you handed them your power. Every word you shouted, every flustered defense, every flash of emotion was exactly what they wanted. And you walked away ashamed, replaying the moment over and over, wishing you had stayed calm. Here's the Machiavellian truth: resistance is inevitable. The moment your presence grows heavier, someone will test you. Weak men cannot tolerate silence. It threatens them. They will jab, mock, or try to humiliate you, desperate to pull you into their noisy game. But remember this: the strongest armor is indifference. Picture this: someone sneers at you across the table, trying to bait you. The room waits for your reaction. Instead of snapping back, you simply look at him, calm, unshaken, unbothered. Seconds pass. His smirk falters. He grows louder, more desperate, until the crowd stops laughing. They see his desperation. They see your composure. And without saying a word, you win. This is the power of resistance. When they push, you don't push back. You let them exhaust themselves against the fortress of your silence. And the moment they collapse, everyone knows who holds the real authority. So ask yourself, will you keep letting others bait you into surrendering your power? Or will you become the one who cannot be rattled, the one whose silence turns enemies into fools? If you've ever felt the sting of losing control, if you're ready to turn every attack into proof of your strength, don't leave this lesson here. Subscribe now and stay with me, because in the next chapter we will face the mirror again, but this time you won't see weakness staring back. You'll see the crown you've earned. Have you ever looked in the mirror and hated the reflection staring back? Have you ever seen tired eyes, a slouched posture, and thought, this is who I've become? This is why no one respects me. And tell me honestly, how many times have you avoided mirrors altogether? Because they reminded you of every failure, every humiliation, every weakness you tried to hide. That pain is private but brutal, because the mirror never lies. It shows you not only what you look like, but what you feel inside. And for years you believed that reflection. You believed the world saw you the same way, fragile, uncertain, invisible. But here's the Machiavellian truth. The mirror is not your enemy. It is your test. And when you shatter the old reflection, you reveal the sovereign beneath it. Imagine this moment. You stand before the glass, but this time you don't search for flaws. You don't adjust your shirt, force a smile, or practice empty affirmations. Instead, you lock eyes with yourself, calm, steady, unshaken. And suddenly the weakness you thought defined you begins to fade. You see it clearly, the crown invisible but undeniable resting on your head. This is the mirror shattering the moment when you stop seeing yourself as the version others mocked, dismissed, or ignored. You stop being the victim of their laughter and become the architect of your presence. The reflection changes not because your face is different, but because your spirit is no longer begging for permission. The crowd outside may still see the old you, but that won't last. Sooner or later they will adjust. Because when you walk with the inner crown, the world is forced to recognize it. This is your lesson. The mirror doesn't define you. You define the mirror. And once you break the illusion of weakness, you'll never fear reflections or opinions again. If you've ever hated the face staring back at you, if you're ready to replace shame with sovereignty, then don't leave this journey halfway. Subscribe now and come with me. Because in the next chapter, you will carry that invisible crown into the world and watch as entire rooms shift in your presence. Have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible, like your presence barely mattered? Have you ever spoken up in a crowd only to be ignored, while someone louder stole the attention you were desperate for? And tell me honestly, how many times have you wished you could walk into any space and command respect without saying a single word? That pain is real. Being overlooked doesn't just bruise your ego, it cuts into your identity. You start to believe that maybe you were never meant to stand out, that maybe the world will always belong to the loudest voices. But deep down, you've always wanted more, not just to be heard, but to be remembered. Here's the Machiavellian truth: power does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And the greatest authority is not the one who talks the most, but the one who forces the room to bend through sheer presence. The crown you've been searching for has never been outside. It has always been silence worn with sovereignty. Imagine this: a conference room full of chatter, a dinner hall full of laughter, a gathering full of noise. You don't compete. You don't rush. You enter slowly, deliberately, carrying yourself as if the crown is already on your head. People sense it. Conversations pause. Eyes shift. Without explanation, you become the axis of the room. You didn't demand attention, you commanded it by needing nothing from them. This is the crown in silence, the invisible authority that makes others measure their words around you, that forces them to respect what you don't even say. The world notices not because you shouted, but because you chose not to. So ask yourself, will you keep chasing scraps of attention, exhausting yourself in noise? Or will you claim the crown in silence and let the world adjust to your presence? If this resonates, if you've ever dreamed of walking into a room and owning it without begging for it, then don't let this lesson slip by. Subscribe now and join me, because in the final chapter, you'll seal your oath and step fully into the Machiavellian path where silence is not just power but destiny. Have you ever promised yourself you'd change only to break that promise days later? Have you ever sworn you'd stop caring about their approval, that you'd stop letting them walk over you, only to find yourself back in the same cycle of begging, apologizing, explaining? And tell me honestly, how many times have you hated yourself more for failing your own word than for failing anyone else? That pain runs deeper than humiliation from others. Because when you break your own promises, you destroy the one relationship that matters most, the one with yourself. You become a stranger in your own skin, a prisoner of weakness you swore you'd leave behind. But here's the Machiavellian truth: transformation begins not with noise, not with speeches, but with an oath. A silent, unshakable vow to yourself that cannot be broken. The crown is not won by chance, it is claimed by decision. Picture this. It's late at night. The world is quiet. You stand alone, no audience, no applause, and you write it down, your oath. From this moment on, I do not beg. I do not explain. I do not live for approval. I live sovereign, untouchable, unshaken. As the words flow, you feel it, the weight of the crown settling on your head. This oath is not for them. It's not to prove you've changed. It's for you. A line in the sand that says, "Never again will I hand my power away." From here forward, every silence you hold, every decision you own, every step you take without asking permission cements that oath into reality. And when doubt creeps in, when enemies mock, when fear whispers, you will return to that vow. And you will remember, you don't need their permission to exist. You already chose your destiny. So ask yourself, will you keep breaking promises to yourself? Or will you seal the oath tonight and step fully into the sovereign life you've been chasing all along? If this strikes a chord, if you're ready to claim the oath and never look back, subscribe now. Because this is only the end of the first book. What comes next is not survival, it's domination.